with you guys.
Yeah, he's been 38 years, 37 years. Yeah, he's going to be retiring relatively soon.
Isn't it like next year?
He's going to do one more year, it sounds like.
Was it one of those? I haven't plugged into that. I just
Well, he was only going to do one more year. Now it sounds
wish
like
I could
he's
tell
gonna do
you.
one more additional year. Like this was going to be it, I feel like, and then. But he'll probably change his mind 3 more times.
Well, that's why we like it. Yeah, okay. We like that point. We don't do other businesses to take care of it. You followed us.
I love the corner, man. Stay there as long as you can.
Alex, move over real quick.
Did you do a mic test real fast?
You gotta really focus on your transition.
Would you mind doing a mic check?
Do you mind doing a mic check?
Sure. We good?
No.
Are you hooked up to this mic here?
Yeah.
I'll lean over here. Maybe I should just talk over. What do you think?
I think it's not turned on.
Is it not on? I've got a red line.
There we
I've got
go.
a green line now.
There we go.
It's a mic or line level.
Is that going to mess up your sound?
No, we're fine.
Yeah, line level, that's pretty good, I think. Need to swap these guys.
I wore the right colors today.
Personality doesn't really work for that market. I grew up in the DC area. So you got 4, I got this ignored that I had 4, 5, 7, 9. And they're all oh man, we get the big time. So then you go to watch videos and you go, what a weird DC.
See, yeah, I am. That's dumb.
You're doing all right, but help me out.
I'm not the problem. I'm not the problem.
Good, how are you? Serious organizations should hold it up for all the things. Water commission together, housing commission together, district commission together. Just finally take it on sort of.
Might be able to fix that. We might be able to fix that very soon.
He's been asking for phone numbers, so I'll send you his.
Soon as he tighten it up.
Spit hat. All right, good morning, everyone. Good to see so many of my reporter friend faces back in town during the off season. Lee Watson, I'm the press secretary for the Democratic Party of Virginia, filling in today for Grant Fox and for Oregon with the House. We're here to talk today about the GOP's latest assault on voting rights of Virginians. And I think I've got a list of everyone. Tell me if I missed anybody. We got Chairwoman Locke, Leader Scott, Delegate Simon, Delegate Mullen, Delegate Carr, Senator Bagby, Senator Hochstein, and Delegate Willett here today. All right. And so, without any further introduction, I'll give you the chairwoman, Megan Block, to talk further about this. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. We appreciate your time and attention to what we consider to be important issue as it relates to voting rights and the current assault on those rights. Virginia Democrats have fought hard to protect the right to vote and strengthen our democracy. Prior to 2020, Virginia was the second hardest state in the country to vote. When Democrats won control of state government in 2019, we took action to strengthen our democracy. We passed the Voting Rights Act of Virginia to fight voter suppression. We expanded early and absentee voting so more Virginians could cast their ballot at their own convenience. We made Election Day a holiday so more folks could make it to the polls. And we made it easier to register to vote with same day and automatic voter registration. Every Virginian, irrespective of their race or zip code, has a fundamental right to vote. And leaders in Richmond have a responsibility to make sure voting is as easy, safe, and accessible as possible to all Virginians. A democracy that works for the people is essential for a government that works for the people. But today, our fundamental right to vote is under attack. Just recently, Glenn Youngkin and Virginia Republicans unleashed their latest attempt to undermine our democracy and make it harder for Virginians to vote. Youngkin's top election official pulled Virginia out of a long-running bipartisan interstate voter program that helps officials maintain their voter rolls and encourages states to register new voters. Virginia actually helped set up this system under Republican Governor Bob McDonnell, but now it is the subject of lies and conspiracy theories from MAGA Republicans. Let's be clear about what the Electronic Registration Information Center does. It's an important tool for keeping states' voter rolls up to date. It actually helps combat voter fraud by alerting election officials when their voters move to a new state. And it encourages states to register new voters by letting officials know about new residents who might be eligible to vote. But ever since Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans began spreading lies and misinformation about the 2020 election, the Electronic Registration Information Center, and therefore our election integrity, has come under attack. Now Republican leaders, including Glenn Youngkin, are buying into Trump's lies and conspiracy theories and pulling out of this interstate agreement, weakening our election systems and democracy. Just gonna go off script just a little. There was a song that Irving Berlin wrote for the musical Annie Get Your Gun called Anything You Can Do. It is a duet where the male singer and the female singer are attempting to outdo each other in what appears to be increasingly complex tasks. Imagine, if you will, Governor Youngkin as one of the singers, but I prefer the puppets version of it, where somebody's pulling the strings. And any of the other red state governors, notably DeSantis of Florida, as the other puppet. The most memorable line of the song is, anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you. That seems to be the case as these states engage in one anti-woke antic after the other. The governor seems to do things in the same foolish manner, or the same foolish move, as all the other red states. Whenever they make a move, he seems to make the same move. Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you. You make the stupid move, I make the same stupid move. Because I can do anything better than you. So Youngkin joined the 7 other Republican states that have pulled out of this interstate organization, including Florida, Louisiana, and Alabama. States along with Virginia have a long history of racist voter suppression tactics, and this is just one more move in that in those antics of I can do anything better than you. And I will now turn it over to Leader Scott. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Locke, Chairman Locke. We're here today to talk about this administration's latest assault on our democracy. I was born in 1965, March 65, March 5th in fact. March 7th, 1965 was known as Bloody Sunday, which was the day that John Lewis and others were beat trying to cross the bridge in Selma, Alabama. They were beat because they were trying to exercise their voting rights. They wanted to have their rights fully recognized in the United States of America. So I'm 58 years old. We've only been doing this American experiment where everybody got to participate since 1965. And at that time, my mother and father lived where they had to endure poll taxes, white-only primaries, facing difficulties in attempting to exercise their right to vote. Later that year, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, a piece of legislation that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. It's with great sadness that I come to Richmond today to see us going backwards, to see folks like Governor Youngkin working diligently to take that right away in the same manner that the segregationists denied millions of Black Americans the right to exercise that right, that sacred right. Last week, the Board of Elections joined other MAGA extremists in withdrawing from the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC. This multi-state, bipartisan organization has been used for years to help make our elections more secure. They've made this move even as their own incompetence has made our systems decidedly less secure. There was a data breach recently where they shared 6 million Virginia Social Security numbers and other personal information. The administration says they will replace the ERIC system, but how can we trust them when they have already shown they're not competent enough to be trusted to safeguard our current data? And you usually don't repeal and replace something without a plan to replace it. What are they replacing it with? And we're coming up on an election here in November. They have no plan to replace it and make sure that we have secure elections. ERIC primarily combats, as Chairman Locke said, the things Republicans claim to care about. This system prevents fraud. Why would Republicans want to do away with it? The answer is, and has always been clear since Governor Youngkin was elected, because they want to undermine our democracy. The Virginia GOP has gone to the other side. The MAGA extremists have taken over, and they want to make it harder for us to vote. These last 2 years, the GOP has put forward legislation to make it harder for Virginians to exercise their most fundamental right. They tried to pass bills attacking early voting, attacking early ballot drop boxes. Everything they passed this last session. Luckily in the Senate it was killed, but it passed in the House. When they couldn't pass those extreme unpopular bills, they switched to other ways of chipping away at our Commonwealth's election institutions. From quietly changing the restoration of rights process to this now surprising departure from ERIC. Everything they do is trying to disrupt our election process. These destructive changes harm voters and undermine faith in our system. Let's call this what it is. Further proof that this administration wants to take us back to the days of Jim Crow. The other states that have pulled out of ERIC, Florida, Louisiana, and Alabama, to name a few, are states with long histories of racist voter suppression tactics. Many that had been under the Department of Justice consent decree, that any changes they made had to be reviewed by the DOJ. MAGA Republicans in Virginia want to make it harder for folks to vote because they know that attacking our democracy, restricting people's voice, and erecting barriers to voting is their only path to power. Virginia Democrats won't stand for these attacks. We know that our Commonwealth is stronger when our democracy is stronger. We know that the only way to protect Virginians' rights and freedoms, their right to make their own health care decisions, right to a good public education, right to a fair wage and affordable health care, is to protect their ultimate right, their right to vote. Let's be crystal clear about what this means. Democracy is on the ballot in Virginia this November, and we wanted to make sure that we let every Virginian know what the governor and his MAGA Republicans are doing right now. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. I think we heard a lot from Leader Scott and Leader Locke, but I want to just fill in some of the little details here. I'm always sort of the detail policy wonky guy, so I'm gonna give you some of those things that are important too. First, I mean, this is wild conspiracy theory stuff, right? I mean, this is right up here on the same level as like Dominion voting systems type of conspiracies. There is no basis, in fact, for any of the attacks on air. I just want everybody to understand that. This is a complete fabrication. It's comes from this original big lie, which is that the 2020 election was somehow stolen. And so you start with that, and then people start looking for things, and they make things up, and they follow Twitter, and so it's really disturbing that the governor and Susan Beale seem to buy in to these debunked conspiracy theories, right? It worries me a lot They're willing to believe that kind of information and actually use that kind of conspiracy theory to guide decision-making over at the Department of Elections. I think that should scare everyone. It's worth reminding us, I mean, it shouldn't be that surprising, given who Susan Beals is and where she came from, right? I mean, a lot of us raised this alarm initially, right? This was Amanda Chase, right? I mean, she is trumping heels, Miss MAGA herself, right? Her chief of staff, who we're now going to turn over the election system to, and we're all sort of reassured, no, they had a falling out. She's a normie, right? She's not one of the conspiracy ones. Well, you know, that's proven not to be the case, right? She is certainly bought into the conspiracy theories. In fact, she just took a taxpayer-funded trip to the Heritage Foundation's big symposium on supposed election integrity, right? Which is, again, really just a seminar on conspiracy theories and how to use them in your state. And she was there taking copious notes, obviously, and came back and drafted this letter, which pulls us out of Eric. So it's clear that here in Virginia, our Republican leaders are buying into Trump's lies, right? They are buying the big lie, they're running with it, and they're making policy based on that. So, again, we want to be really clear about something, and I think we've heard it twice. Eric exists to help combat voter fraud, right? If you're concerned about people voting twice, if you're concerned about people voting, registering to vote in 2 different states and trying to walk across the border and vote again, that's what Eric is designed to prevent, and it's actually really good at it, right? It's good, it's scientific, it's precise. And it's not optional, by the way. Virginia law requires us to compare voter registration data and lists of persons from all states bordering the Commonwealth to maintain the overall accuracy of Virginia's voting systems, right? So the question has to be, well, if not through Eric, how are we going to do it, right? As Leader Scott says, are we going to trust folks that couldn't send ballot information directing you to the right, polling place during last year's election, when they sent people from Richmond County to go vote in the city of Richmond, when they sent people from Fairfax County to go vote in Fairfax City into the wrong voting place. And now we got a few months, right, to come up with a new system to completely replace Eric and provide this legally to fulfill this legal obligation. I don't trust that the folks in charge of the elections office today are capable of doing that. So I don't know how the state's going to achieve this within 6 months, how elections going to manage it. By the way, we still haven't been able to replace Barron's, right? I mean, the excuses we heard about everything, we couldn't import the voter data we've got, right, from the DMV to our own voter rolls because the system's outdated. And I think they pretty clearly said, well, we're not doing anything new until we replace Ferris. And yet they pull us out of Eric, and now we've got a few months to implement a completely new system from scratch to try and prevent voter fraud. So if you care about voter integrity, if you really care about voter integrity, if you really care about preventing voter fraud, you put us back in Eric. You withdraw this memo, you stay in it, and you stick with what works. The problem with Eric, of course, is that it also gives us information both ways. Hey, look, here are people moving into Virginia. And here's the people that want to register to vote, since they're now coming in from another state. And that's a big part of what they're trying to do. So one, casting down on the whole system, and two, making it harder to register people to vote. Ultimately, it's a voter suppression tactic, and it's disappointing to see it. It's not terribly surprising. I hope that we can get this right, get this ship right. And I think that those of us in the General Assembly would like to see us get back in Eric. Let's get this right. Let's cast the conspiracy theories aside. Let's get serious. And let's put serious people in charge of running our elections here in Virginia. Thank you very much.
We have time this morning for just a handful of questions, if anybody's got any for our members. Yes?
Do you all have thoughts on what specifically should be done? Have you talked to the administration? Could you add budget language? Try to remove Susan Beals if you win the majority? What's on the table?
I'll take it. Thank you. I would love to see budget language be put in. The governor has made policy in the budget last cycle. I would love to see, we're in the minority in the House with our friends here who are in the majority in the Senate. I would love to make that a point that there is no budget if we pull out of Eric. There is no budget. We don't come back because the governor is doing a lot of harm in this situation. We need to be very circumspect of the moves he's making. And surprisingly, well, you know what we didn't hear during the entire session that we had? We didn't hear anything about issues around Eric. We have an Attorney General, Jason Harris, who says he's creating a election integrity unit, right? He hadn't said a word about this. He didn't say a word about needing to pull out in Eric during session. He didn't introduce any. In fact, he said Eric was a good thing, and go ask him about that. And then he didn't introduce any legislation that says, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z. The AG can bring down legislation. This is clearly MAGA Republican, Heritage Foundation, conspiracy theory driven, as the chairwoman said, trying to keep up with what these other red states, the governor's trying to position himself. Say he's not running for president, but he keeps doing stuff to position himself to be in the same, so DeSantis won't get to the ultra MAGA right of him. And so I think there are a lot of options on the table. That's one option. If the Senate, the Senate has the juice, I will be hopefully asking them to refrain from agreeing to anything if the governor pulls out of Eric. Because the governor has not, and nobody's asked him, explain to us how you verify this data if you're not using Eric. And I'm really disappointed that a lot of folks are giving him a free pass to do this without any plan, trusting them when they've already screwed up so many things in voting, sending registrations to the wrong addresses and sent in several different districts, saying that they can't transfer the information from DMV to register voters. They are incompetent. And now you're gonna trust these same incompetent folks to pull out Eric and get it right? The media should be asking some serious questions for the government. This is huge. This is very big.
Yeah, the resignation letter quotes increasing and uncertain costs of the removal of, or the resignation of the other states to Virginia. That was one of the reasons for Virginia resigning themselves. I mean, can you talk about how much the monetary stake in this, the cost, and just kind of your thoughts on that claim that this was kind of financially?
Did they even say what the cost was? No.
Right.
And they always say that it didn't have anything to do with, voter fraud or voter integrity or anything like that. It has to do with governance. So what's the governance structure that bothers you? They never say that either. It always goes back to, as Delegate Simon said, the big lie. All of this pulling out of Eric is a pretense to go back to supporting MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump and the 2020 election. That is what all of this has to do with. It has nothing to do with how Eric works, or the work that it does. With Virginia being a charter member of Eric, this is all a joke and a hoax. And the questions that you all should be asking is the question that you just asked. How much is it really costing you? If it's costing you money, tell us how much. If there's a whole bunch of voter fraud, tell us what it is. If they can't tell you because it's not true. Everything that they're telling you is totally inaccurate. And it all goes back to, we want to do what our MAGA Republican friends are doing.
Can I add something to that? What's it gonna cost to replace it? He hadn't said anything about what the cost is to replace it. And normally when you have 20-something people paying for something, you spread the cost out, it's cheaper. You have one person paying for it, one state paying for it, it's more expensive. So it's probably gonna cost Virginia money, and they're probably happy to pay this money, pay more money to move along to satisfy Donald Trump. He's back on the scene, and they're doing everything in their power to align themselves with the policies of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Delegate, you mentioned about this being legally required to do the neighboring states. I'm not sure, if they don't get a replacement system in place, what are the potential penalties or punishments, and to whom would they be administered?
Well, so the law says that they have to do this, and so it's a matter of figuring out how. Eric has been a very efficient and cost-effective way to do this, by the way, right? Spreading the cost over 20. So in theory, you'd have to go out and enter into these interagency agreements with each state. So you have to go find somebody in Tennessee who's does the elections there. You got to find somebody in North Carolina, figure out who it is, do a memorandum of understanding, compare the lists, and they're not going to be as accurate. It's not going to get done in time, and it's going to be more expensive. And and then what happens if it doesn't? Right? I think that's exactly the question. This is the whole casting aspersions on the whole thing, right? Now, so first they sabotage this. First they break it, right? And then we have elections, and they say, well, you guys didn't comply, right? You guys didn't do all the matching you were supposed to do, and try and throw down on the whole election system. So it's all part of the same problem. So the problem, the penalty is to all Virginians, right? When you have folks out there casting doubt on their votes, or you go to some sort of overly broad system, which ends up disenfranchising legitimate voters because you don't have a precise system that actually identifies the people that ought to be off the rolls, and so you just do something that's overly broad, and you have people casting provisional ballots that really shouldn't have.
No. I was just saying something. I was stating the obvious. And the obvious is, I heard the senator, the delegate mention that, the law and the acts of the General Assembly, but it's been proven, even recently with DEI, that the governor doesn't care what the General Assembly says, and what the law says, and so, I don't even think that's a factor, in this equation. This is a Trump world.
Senator, on that note, do you have any comment on Youngkin giving the commencement speech at VMI, or does anyone have anything to say on that piece?
Was BMI gonna say no?
What's any state institution going to say?
Well, just do the math. I mean, just do the math on where he decided to go. I'm sorry. Do the math, because no one was talking about that. Do the math on where he decided to go. He decided to go to the only predominantly white institutions in the Commonwealth of Virginia that's headed by black folk. Each and every one of those spaces. They don't have a choice. Those students didn't have a choice. They don't want to be penalized for the budget. He's already scaring them with DEI. It's big bullying. And we just gotta call it out.
You didn't go to Norfolk State?
I did have one question,
Sure, yeah, and then one more after you, we're out of time.
When this was chartered in 2012, can someone explain, I guess, either the improvements or the differences that were made by entering into the ERIC system compared to how you did this kind of work before that, right? Kind of the changes that the actual.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit of the history, right? So, this idea that the costs are getting too much. We started out, there's 7 states, 4 Republican states, by the way, and 3 Democratic states, right? So this wasn't like a woke improvement here. This isn't some sort of liberal conspiracy theory. And what it does is it streamlines it and standardizes it, right? So everybody's using the same set of data. You don't have to worry about data sets that don't match and things like that. And it was an efficient system that other states decided they all wanted to join into, right? So that you can do it. It's just one central clearinghouse for everybody. Everybody puts in, and everybody gets out the same information in the same format in the same way. And again, the alternative is doing one-off interagency agreements, one set of Board of Elections at a time with each state you start with what's near you, but this requires bordering states. But what about people that come from Delaware through Maryland to Virginia, right? They don't necessarily border us. And so, or people that come up from South Carolina or Georgia to Virginia, how are we gonna handle those? And so ERIC was just a good standardized way to do it. It was efficient, it was cost effective, and it had data integrity, so that you only took people off the rolls that ought to be taken off the rolls. So it was a much better system. It was widely adopted until Donald Trump started spreading lies about elections, and it became in vogue for conservatives to start to look for more lies to tell about the election system.
This is Governor McDonald's. He's the one that got us in this
Right.
Republican governor. This is the second policy that Youngkin, that McDonald's administration started that Youngkin is now overturning because it's not extreme enough. He has to be more extreme than Pat Robertson's governor.
It's 9:30, so one more question, and we'll wrap this up. Even better. Thank you guys so much for your time, I appreciate it.